It began not with an edict, but with a single knock, a sound that meant your family's legacy was now a liability. Imagine the dread that seeped into a Roman villa when that knock came. A girl of 15 named Livia is brushing her hair, preparing for sleep. Her world is the soft rustle of Livin and her mother's distant voice. Then the sound. Ironclad boots on the mosaic floor of the atrium. The Praetorians do not request, they inform. The lantern they carry isn't for light, its glass is stained a deep, bloody crimson, a signal to the entire street that this house has been chosen. In moments, Livia will see her father's face contort into a mask of compliance. In moments, her mother will bite her lip to stop a sob. And in moments, Livia will learn a terrible truth. To be born noble under a certain emperor was not a blessing, but a curse waiting to be collected. If you think the horror is in the taking, you are mistaken. What awaited her inside the imperial residence would make the journey there seem like a reprieve. This is the story of a place history tried to scrub clean, a place called the Pleasure Grove. And our guide into this darkness is Livia. Remember her name, because to understand how a palace could become a slaughterhouse for the soul, you must first understand the man who built it. Caligula was not born a monster, he was manufactured. The heir to a hero's legacy, the son of Germanicus, a general so adored his soldiers would have marched into the underworld for him. The boy was born into the blinding light of glory. He should have been molded by virtue. Instead, he was tempered in a forge of betrayal. His playground was the frontier camp among legionaries whose language was violence. They called him Little Boot, a fond nickname for a child in miniature armor. But that world taught its first brutal lesson early. Authority is not given, it is seized, and once held, it answers to no one. Then the unthinkable. His father dead under suspicious clouds, his mother and brothers exiled and executed. The boy was sent to the island of Capri to live under the roof of the very emperor who destroyed his family, Tiberius. For years, Caligula survived in a gilded cage of paranoia. Here he learned a second, more corrosive rule. To stay alive, you must grin at the monster who holds your chain. He smothered every scream, buried every tear, and in that silence, something inside him fossilized into something cold and hard. When Tiberius finally died and Caligula ascended, Rome wept with joy. The golden sun had returned. He emptied prisons, burned secret files, spent lavishly on games. For a few fleeting months, hope felt real. But the man who would one day summon Livia was merely sleeping. And then a severe fever struck him down. When he rose from his sickbed, a piece of his conscience did not get up with him. The mask, now permanently fused, began to crack from the inside out. Standing atop the world, he saw not citizens, but subjects, not people, but possessions. Absolute power doesn't corrupt, it reveals the emptiness beneath. And so the mechanism of terror began to turn, its gears oiled by silence. The summonses went out. Scrolls bearing the imperial seal demanded a family's most prized daughter for service to the state. Refusal meant death. Compliance meant a different kind of death. Livia was taken to a secluded compound within the palace walls. Caligula, with a tyrant's irony, named it the Garden of Delights, the Pleasure Grove. At first glance, it was paradise. Fountains murmured, exotic scents hung in the air, silks draped every surface. The young women arrived believing they were entering a life of sacred privilege. They would soon learn that every luxury was a link in their shackles. The jewels they were given were not adornments, they were weights, marking them as imperial property. The gossamer gowns were not clothing, but deliberate exposure, a reminder their bodies were no longer their own. Their very names were stolen, replaced with numbers or vulgar pet names. But the core of the torture was neither gold nor silk. It was anticipation, the endless gnawing wait. Would the call come tonight, next week? The sound of a guard's footstep outside the door was enough to paralyze. By the time Caligula demanded their presence, their spirits were already fractured. The summonses led to the banquets.
Here, Rome's elite dined and drank, and here the young women were paraded like thoroughbred horses. Caligula would stroll among them, critiquing their forms aloud, reducing human beings to cuts of meat. The true brutality, however, lay in the audience. Senators, fathers, potential husbands, all forced to watch, to laugh at the emperor's jokes, to swallow their fury. A single flinch could mean execution. Their collective silence was a verdict. And then the private rituals. These were not acts of passion, but of cold calculation, choreographed performances of dominance. Soft music played to drown out other sounds, selected witnesses observed. For Caligula, this was not about desire, it was about demonstration. He was proving he owned not just Rome's land, but its very soul. Livia, standing there, realized she was not a person to him. She was a lesson, a living classroom on the extent of his power. His cruelty was systematic. He would swing from violent rage to tearful affection, gifting a girl he had beaten with a fortune in gems. This emotional chaos was a weapon. It bred a sick dependency. The destroyer became the only source of solace. He shattered solidarity by ranking the women, pitting them against each other for scraps of safety. Then he entangled the entire ruling class. When he grew bored, he would sell a broken woman to a senator or general, forcing the elite to share in his guilt. Complicity became the empire's strongest chain. And the families? Some were commanded to host feasts celebrating their daughter's honor. They toasted their child's violation, smiles stapled to their faces, knowing a single tear would be their last. In Caligula's Rome, gratitude was the final form of despair. By 40 AD, the pleasure grove was a gallery of ghosts. The vibrant girls who entered were now hollowed shells. Many stopped speaking. Doctors would have called it dissociation, the soul fleeing a body it could no longer endure. And then the whispers of the only escape left, suicide. The official count was hidden, but servants spoke of those who used shards of fine pottery or strips of their own costly sheaths. For them, the final choice was the only freedom left. In that gilded cage, death became an act of defiance. Caligula, in his final mad act, devised a new torment. He allowed parents to visit. The girls were painted, dressed, and coached to perform happiness. Mother and daughter, separated by an arm's length and an ocean of terror, had to act out a scene of joy under the watch of guards. The price for a cracked voice was death. This was torture refined to an art form. But tyranny sows the seeds of its own destruction. Caligula began to mock the very men who protected him, the Praetorian Guard. He humiliated veterans like Cassius Chariot with vile passwords and public shaming. The insult turned to hatred, hatred to conspiracy. On January 24, 41 AD, as Caligula slipped through a secluded palace corridor, the trap sprang. Cassius and his allies struck. The first blow took his voice. 30 more finished the work. The god king died in a heap, mortal and terrified. In the pleasure grove, the women heard the chaos, the running, the shouts, then an eerie quiet. Was it over? Had the world changed? Their conditioning was too deep. They huddled, waiting for the next horror. They were right to fear. Caligula's German guards went berserk, massacring anyone in their path. The palace became a charnel house. Some women fled through corridors slick with blood. Others froze, locked in their opulent cells. From the chaos emerged a survivor. Claudius, Caligula's bookish uncle, proclaimed emperor. He faced a monumental problem. The truth of the pleasure grove, if fully known, would expose the complicity of Rome's entire ruling class. His solution was not justice, but commerce. The surviving women were returned to their families. Their compensation? Massive dowries, chests of gold, expensive robes, a bribe to purchase eternal silence. The command was clear: forget. So they returned, but Livia did not come home. A shell did. In a society that worshipped female purity above all, these victims were now stained property. Most were hidden away in remote wings of family estates, ghosts in their own lives. A sudden touch could trigger panic. Night brought relentless terrors. The physical prison was gone, but the mental one had no key. For them, survival was the longest sentence. Rome looked away. It was easier to bury the crime than confront the rotting foundation of its own power. The story of the Pleasure Grove isn't just about one mad emperor, it's about the fatal flaw of absolute rule. When all power, legal, military, and divine, concentrates in one pair of hands, there is no check against the darkness that may lurk within. Caligula was not an aberration, he was a possibility baked into the system. The empire built aqueducts and laws that lasted millennia, yet failed its most basic duty, to protect the vulnerable from the predator at the very top. This history is a warning, etched not in stone, but in the erased memories of the nameless. History belongs to the loudest voices, but the whispers from the shadows, the stifled cries,
The letters never sent, they endure, and now they are ours to remember. If this story angered you, let it. If it made you think about the price of unchecked authority, then the silence has finally been broken.